I never thought I'd reach a point in my life where I'd be staring at my phone, actually praying, that one of my children might finally pick up after 2 decades of silence, only to hear the same cold, automatic voice telling me the number I dialed was unavailable. But that's exactly where I was, sitting on the edge of a bed that felt too big for me, after years of trying and hoping and failing. 20 years. 20 long unbearable years where my own children treated me like I was already dead. They avoided me, ignored every call I made, never answered a message, never responded to anything. Imagine being a parent and wondering if your kids even remember what your voice sounds like. Now here's the part where I still question myself, was I wrong for what I did back then? Did I deserve to be cut out of their lives this harshly? That's what I need you to decide. Because every day, the same question haunts me, was this my fault, or did they punish me for something I never actually did? When I tell people that my children haven't spoken to me in 20 years, the first reaction I usually get is shock, and then judgment. People assume I must have been some terrible, abusive parent. But I wasn't. I wasn't perfect, no parent is, but I loved my kids more than anything in the world. I woke up early every morning to pack their lunches, attended every school play, scraped together money for birthdays, and stayed up late helping them with homework. I thought I was doing everything right. I thought the bond we had was unbreakable. But apparently, there are forces stronger than love, lies, manipulation, resentment, and the poison that can spread when someone you trust turns your own children against you. And in my case, that someone was their mother, my ex-wife Sarah. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. Because nothing about what happened makes sense unless you understand what our life looked like before everything fell apart. I met Sarah when we were young. Too young, maybe. I was 23, she was 21, and we were both naive enough to believe that love alone could fix everything. She was beautiful, full of fire and ambition, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and take command of the whole atmosphere. I fell hard and fast. We moved in together after only 6 months, and by the end of the year, she was pregnant with our first child, Emma. 2 years later, we had our son, Daniel. Back then, it felt like we were building something real, a family, a future. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that people can hide who they really are for years before the cracks begin to show. At first, things seemed normal. We argued sometimes, sure, but who doesn't? Money was tight, and we were both still figuring out how to be adults and parents at the same time. I worked 2 jobs for a while. Construction during the day and security at night, just to keep us afloat. Meanwhile, Sarah stayed home with the kids. I never complained. I wanted her to rest, to focus on the children, to not feel pressured. But over time, I started noticing things about her, things I tried to ignore, things I told myself weren't a big deal. She was short-tempered, especially with the kids. Not physically abusive, but cold, dismissive, easily irritated. She'd snap at them for the smallest things. If they spilled juice, she'd act like they ruined her life. If they were noisy, she'd lock herself in the bedroom and refuse to come out for hours. I'd try to talk to her, to ask if she was okay, but she always said the same thing. I'm tired. You don't understand what it's like taking care of them all day. And maybe she was right. Maybe she did feel overwhelmed. But something about her frustration didn't feel normal. It felt sharper, meaner, like she resented the kids for existing. Still, I tried to brush it off and focused on supporting the family however I could. Then things began to shift in a direction I couldn't ignore. She started comparing me to her friends' husbands, how they had better jobs, better cars, better lives. She claimed I wasn't doing enough, even though I was working almost 80 hours a week. When I reminded her that I was doing everything I could, she'd roll her eyes and say, "Sure, keep telling yourself that." Our arguments grew more frequent, more intense. She accused me of not caring. I accused her of being ungrateful. The house was always tense. But despite everything, I still thought we could fix it. I never imagined how far she'd go, or how deeply her actions would damage the one thing I cherished most, my relationship with my children. When Emma was around 8 and Daniel was 6, things got worse. That was the year Sarah started disappearing for long stretches without explaining where she'd been. She'd leave me alone with the kids for entire weekends, claiming she needed a break. Sometimes she'd come home smelling like alcohol or perfume that wasn't hers. When I confronted her, she'd twist everything around, shouting that I was controlling and paranoid. I didn't want the kids to see us fight, so I tried to stay calm, but that only made her angrier. Then came the moment that changed everything, the moment she realized she could use the children as weapons. It started small. I noticed Emma becoming distant with me. She'd avoid eye contact, give short answers, and sometimes even flinch when I reached out to hug her. Daniel followed soon after, growing colder, quieter. I couldn't understand it. Nothing had happened between us. I tried talking to them, but they'd just shrug and say nothing was wrong. Eventually, after weeks of trying, I overheard something. Emma whispering to Daniel in their room, her voice trembling. Mom said we have to stay away from him. She said he gets angry and breaks things. I froze. Break things. Me. I'd never laid a hand on my children, never even raised my voice to the point of scaring them. I felt sick. My own kids were afraid of me because of something she told them. I confronted Sarah immediately, demanding to know why she'd lie about something like that. She didn't deny it. She just stared at me with this cold, satisfied look and said, "Maybe if you were a better father, I wouldn't have to protect them." Protect them from me? That was the first time I realized she wasn't just angry or overwhelmed. She was cruel, vindictive. And she was perfectly willing to destroy my bond with our children if it meant gaining power over me. Things spiraled quickly after that. She began telling the kids twisted versions of our arguments, claiming I had screamed at her when I hadn't, that I threatened her when all I did was ask a question, that I was unstable, dangerous. At one point she even told them I might leave and never come back, which devastated them. And then she'd turn around and tell me the kids didn't want to spend time with me because they can see the kind of person you really are. It was a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I tried everything: therapy, mediation, talking calmly, spending more time with the kids, taking days off work to be present. None of it mattered. Once the poison was in their heads, nothing I said felt believable to them. Sarah had gotten to them first. She controlled the narrative. Eventually, I hit my breaking point. I couldn't keep living in a home filled with hatred and manipulation. So I told Sarah I wanted a separation. I thought maybe some space would help everyone breathe and reset. But she took that announcement and twisted it into the ultimate betrayal. Within a week, she filed for full custody. I was blindsided. She claimed I was emotionally unstable, that I had anger issues, that I was unpredictable and unsafe to be around the children. All lies. Every single one, but the worst part, she coached the kids to say the same things in court. I'll never forget sitting in that courtroom, listening to my 8-year-old daughter tell a judge that she was afraid of me, watching my 6-year-old son nod silently when the judge asked if he felt unsafe. I wanted to scream, to cry, to stand up and tell them the truth, but I couldn't. I couldn't shatter them even more. They genuinely believed what she told them. Their fear wasn't fake, it was crafted. By the end of it, I walked out with supervised visitation rights, supervised as if I were some kind of criminal. That arrangement lasted less than a year. Little by little, the kids refused to come to the visitation center. They claimed they didn't want to see me. And after enough refusals, the court told me there was nothing they could do. I couldn't force my children into a relationship they didn't want. And just like that, they were gone. Days turned into weeks, then months, then years. I called. I texted. I sent cards on every birthday, every holiday, every milestone. I left voicemails filled with love, apologies, stories, anything just to leave a piece of myself for them. I never got a response. Not once. As time passed, I watched from a distance when I could. Social media, mutual friends, people who knew them. I saw Emma graduate from high school. I saw Daniel win a scholarship, but they never acknowledged me, not even with a glance if I happened to be near. They acted like I didn't exist, like I died years ago. Do you know what that does to a parent? To be alive, breathing, standing just feet away from your own kids and still be invisible. 20 years of this. 20 years of silence, loneliness, guilt, and doubt. And then one day, everything changed because I discovered something that flipped the entire story upside down and made me question whether I had been too passive, too forgiving, too hopeful. Before I tell you what that discovery was, let me continue the story of how my life kept unraveling even after the divorce, because trust me, the lies didn't stop there. Years after losing custody, I learned that Sarah had remarried. Her new husband, a man named Patrick, seemed normal from the outside, but something about him always made me feel uneasy, not that my opinion mattered anymore. He took on the role of stepfather to my kids, and instead of encouraging them to reconnect with me, he doubled down on Sarah's narrative. Together, they built a whole new story about me, a story where I was some villain lurking in the background of their lives, someone dangerous, someone unworthy of love. I wanted to fight back. I wanted to take them to court again. But lawyers are expensive, and lies are hard to disprove once they've been set in stone. Every time I saved up enough to try, I'd be told the same thing. Your children are older now. Judges prioritize their preferences. and their preference, thanks to years of manipulation, was to stay away from me. At some point, I stopped trying legally, but I never stopped hoping emotionally. I kept thinking that maybe one day, when they were older, they'd come looking for the truth. Meanwhile, my own life fell apart. I battled depression, loneliness, the weight of being labeled something I wasn't. Friends drifted away because they didn't understand what I was going through. My own family questioned whether I'd done something to deserve the fallout. I didn't blame them, I questioned it myself sometimes. When you spend years hearing silence from the people you love most, it messes with your mind. You start wondering if maybe the lies had some truth, even when you know they didn't. But let me bring you to the moment where everything shifted again, because this is where the story takes a turn so sharp it still leaves me breathless. One day, out of nowhere, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Most unknown numbers were spam or telemarketers, and that day, I was exhausted. But something in my chest told me to pick up. It was a woman. Her voice sounded nervous, hesitant, and the first thing she said was, "Are you Emma and Daniel's father?" My heart stopped. I didn't know who she was or how she had my number, but the way she said their names, soft, careful, made me sit down. I asked her who she was, and after a long pause, she said, "My name is Lily. I think you need to know something. Something about your children. Something about everything you think happened." Her voice cracked. And right then I felt the ground shift beneath me. Because her next sentence was the spark that would eventually expose everything, absolutely everything, that had been stolen from me for 20 years. And before I reveal what she told me, the truth that shattered everything I thought I knew, I want to ask you again, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? If your children avoided you for 20 years based on lies someone else fed them, would you still keep trying? Would you still hold on to hope? Or would you walk away and let them live their lives without you? Because this story, it only gets more complicated from here. And the choice I had to make after Lily's call changed everything. When Lily called me that day, I had no idea that her voice, trembling and uncertain on the other end of the line, would be the beginning of a truth so massive it would knock the breath out of my lungs. Even after 20 years of silence, of unanswered calls, of birthdays spent alone with a phone in my hand, nothing could have prepared me for the weight of what she was about to tell me. I remember gripping the phone so tightly that my knuckles went pale. I remember feeling this strange mixture of fear and hope swirling in my stomach, fear that something terrible had happened, and hope that maybe, finally, this was the turning point I'd been waiting for. I asked her why she was calling me, and there was a long stretch of silence on the line. Then she said the words that made my entire world tilt. "I'm friends with your daughter, with Emma. And I think you've been lied to for a very long time." My breath caught in my throat. Hearing Emma's name out loud, spoken by a stranger, felt surreal. It felt like someone had reached through time and grabbed hold of a version of me I'd buried long ago. I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I whispered, almost afraid to speak too loudly. "What do you mean lied to?" Her voice wavered. I can't explain everything over the phone. But I need to talk to you. It's important. It's about what your kids were told about you. Everything they think they know, it isn't true." Even as she spoke, I struggled to believe it. I dreamed of hearing something like this for years. Imagined scenarios where someone finally admitted what I'd always feared, that Sarah had poisoned my children's minds. But hearing this from a real person, it felt unreal. I asked her where she wanted to meet, and she suggested a cafe in a neighboring town. I agreed immediately, terrified she would change her mind. As soon as the call ended, I sat there for a long time, staring into nothing, my mind racing with possibilities, wild, chaotic possibilities. Was this finally the moment everything would make sense? Or was this just another cruel twist in a story that had already broken me more times than I could count? I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emma as a little girl running into my arms, or Daniel giggling as I pushed him on a swing, or both of them sitting beside me as we watched cartoons every Saturday morning. These memories have been both my greatest treasure and my greatest torment. They reminded me of what I had lost and what might be coming back. The next day, I went to the cafe early. I must have looked insane, sitting there fidgeting with my coffee cup, glancing at the door every few seconds. Then she walked in, a young woman in her mid-20s, long brown hair, nervous eyes. She recognized me instantly and approached. "You're him," she said softly. I nodded. "I'm him." We sat down, and for a moment neither of us spoke. She looked down at her hands, twisting a ring around her finger. clearly trying to gather the courage to say what she came to say. Finally, she took a deep breath and looked up at me. "I met Emma in college," she said. "We became really close. And eventually, she opened up about her issues with family. She told me she didn't have a father, that he abandoned them, that he scared them, that he was violent. And when I asked more questions, some of the details didn't make sense. They felt rehearsed. My stomach twisted. Hearing that my kids thought I abandoned them was like being punched in the chest. That was the narrative Sarah crafted. I kept my hands flat on the table, trying to steady myself. "So what happened?" I asked. Continued. "About a month ago, Emma had a breakdown. She was stressed from work, from family stuff, from everything. And she told me that she always felt there were things about her childhood that didn't add up. She said she remembered you sometimes being kind, being present, but her mother always insisted those memories were false. She said she was told that you were dangerous, that you yelled all the time, that you threatened her mom. But she couldn't remember any of that herself. She only remembered feeling confused." I felt tears sting my eyes. My voice came out shaky. "She remembered kindness." Lily nodded. "Yes." And that scared her because it didn't match the story she was told her whole life. That's when she started questioning things. And that's when I started digging. "Digging," I repeated, my heartbeat quickening. Lily nodded again, more firmly this time. "I looked up old records, court documents. I talked to a few people from your old neighborhood. Even reached out to a former coworker of hers. And everything pointed to one thing. Your ex-wife lied. A lot. She exaggerated things, fabricated things, twisted things, and in some cases, made up things entirely." Hearing that confirmation after 20 years hit me like a tidal wave. I felt something inside me break, but in a way that released years of buried pain. I covered my face with my hands, breathing shakily. Lily paused, letting me absorb it. When I finally looked up, she continued gently, "There's more. Your daughter doesn't know I'm talking to you yet. She isn't ready to reach out herself. She's scared. And your son is, even more guarded. But the reason I reached out is because Emma deserves the real story. And so do you. And someone needs to tell the truth before it's too late." I whispered. "Too late? What do you mean?" Lily's eyes softened with sympathy. "Your ex-wife, she's sick?" My breath caught. "Sick how?" "Cancer," she said quietly. "Advanced. She hasn't told your kids the full extent yet, but she probably will soon. And once she's gone, they're going to be left with her lies, unless you step in and tell them what actually happened." The room felt like it was shrinking around me. I didn't wish her suffering. I'm not that kind of person, but the irony was brutal. After years of ruining my life, she was now nearing the end of hers. And my children were about to lose the only parent they believed they had. "So," Lily said softly, "what do you want to do?" And there it was, the impossible question. After 20 years of silence, abandonment, rejection, anger, pain, was I ready to open that door again? Was I ready to let my children back into my life? Or was I setting myself up to be shattered all over again? Before answering, I needed to think. I went home, sat on my couch, and stared at the photos I'd kept of Emma and Daniel when they were small. I thought of the birthday cards they never received, because Sarah probably threw them away. The letters that were never opened. The countless nights I stayed awake, replaying what I could have done differently. And then I thought of Emma, confused and hurting, finally starting to question the false reality she had been fed, and Daniel silent, hardened, loyal to a lie he never asked for. They were adults now, old enough to question, old enough to choose for themselves. I realized something then, a truth that settled in my chest like a warm ember. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want apologies. I didn't want validation. I just wanted my children back. I wanted the chance to love them again, even if it was messy and slow and painful. I wanted them to know the truth, not for my sake, but for theirs. So I called Lily the next morning and said, "I'm ready." She set everything up, a meeting, not with both of them, just with Emma for now. She said Daniel was too closed off to agree yet, but Emma was willing to meet if it was in a public, neutral place. My heart raced as I walked toward that park bench where we were supposed to meet. I saw her long before she noticed me. She was sitting rigidly, hands clenched in her lap, her dark hair pulled back, shoulders tense. She looked so grown, so strong, so unfamiliar, and yet achingly familiar all at once. My baby girl. My daughter. I couldn't breathe for a moment. I approached slowly. When she finally looked up and saw me, her face went pale. Her eyes widened, and for a second, I thought she might run. I sat down a few feet away, leaving space between us. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, she whispered, "Hi." It was the smallest word, but it almost brought me to tears. I whispered back, "Sweetheart." She flinched slightly at the word, sweetheart, and I immediately regretted it, but then she asked, "Did you ever want to see me?" Her voice cracked like she was afraid of the answer. My heart broke. I swallowed hard. "Every day," I said, "every birthday, every holiday, every night before I went to sleep. There wasn't a single day I didn't want to see you?" She looked away, eyes welling up. "Mom said you didn't care?" I shook my head slowly. She wiped her eyes quickly and asked, "Did you ever yell at us? Or scare us? Or threaten Mom?" "No," I said softly but firmly. "I argued with her sometimes, like all couples do. But I never threatened her. I never hurt her. And I never, not once, hurt you or your brother. I loved you both more than anything." She looked so confused, like her whole reality was collapsing. "But," she said. "I know," I whispered. "And I'm sorry you lived with those lies." She swallowed hard, her hands shaking. "Why didn't you try harder? Why didn't you fight?" That question hit me like a punch. I explained everything. The custody battle, the manipulation, the visitation refusals, the courts saying I couldn't force you to see me, the lawyers telling me I had no chance without proof. I told her how I still tried letters, messages, birthdays, everything. I told her how hollow and hopeless it felt after years of silence. I told her how depression almost swallowed me whole. How I never stopped loving them, not even for a second. By the time I finished, she was crying openly. I don't know what to believe," she whispered. "That's okay," I said softly. "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." The conversation went on for 2 hours, painful questions, emotional honesty, long silences, but by the end she said, "Can we meet again?" And I nodded, unable to speak. She hugged me before she left. Not tightly, not confidently, but long enough for me to memorize the moment. Long enough for hope to grow roots in my chest. Over the next few weeks we met again. And again, slowly, painfully, she began unraveling the lies. She asked harder questions. I gave honest answers. She talked about her childhood, her confusion, her anger, her loyalty to her mother, her fear of confronting the truth. And I listened, patiently, gently, gratefully. Then one day she said, "I want to bring Daniel." I froze. Daniel, the one who hated me the most, who believed every word their mother said. But I agreed. When I saw him, he was cold, distant, defensive. He didn't want to sit, didn't want to talk. But Emma encouraged him, told him what she'd learned. He resisted. He accused me of lying. He brought up old stories, the ones Sarah fabricated, and I calmly disproved them. I watched his face change as cracks formed in the narrative he'd clung to for so long. Anger turned to confusion. Confusion turned to doubt. Doubt turned to fear. Finally, he muttered, "If everything she said was a lie, then my whole childhood was a lie." I nodded, tears rolling down my cheeks. "I'm sorry, son. I'm so sorry." He didn't hug me that day. But he didn't walk away either, and that was enough. As the weeks turned into months, both of my children slowly, painfully re-entered my life. Emma softened first. She forgave faster. Daniel struggled longer, but even he began to thaw as more truth surfaced. We had long talks, emotional breakdowns, awkward dinners. But we were trying. For the first time in 20 years, we were trying. Then came the call I never expected, a call from Sarah herself. Her voice was weaker than I remembered, tired, fragile. "I heard you've been meeting the kids," she said quietly. "Yes," I replied. "I have." A long pause. Then, barely audible, "I'm sorry. Not enough. Far too late." But after everything, it was something. I asked her why she did it. Why she poisoned them against me. Why she took 20 years of their lives, and mine, and twisted them into something cruel and broken. She sighed weakly. "I was jealous, angry, insecure. I thought you'd leave me. I wanted to hurt you first. And the kids, they trusted me. It was easy. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel triumph. I felt sadness. A deep, aching sadness for all the years we lost." She passed away 3 months later. At her funeral, my children stood beside me, not as strangers, but as my children again. We walked together. We cried together. And afterward, Emma hugged me tightly and whispered, "I don't want to lose you again." Daniel didn't say much, but when we walked to the parking lot, he fell into step beside me and said quietly, "I'm trying, Dad." I smiled through tears. That's all I ever needed. The healing wasn't fast, it wasn't simple, but it was happening. Bit by bit, day by day, we rebuilt what was stolen from us. And now, standing here 20 years after losing everything, I've begun to regain the one thing I'd given up hope on, my family. So tell me, was I wrong for waiting? Was I wrong for holding on to hope for 20 years? Was I foolish to believe the truth would eventually come out? Or was this the only path that could have led us back to each other? If you've been with me through this entire story, thank you. Truly. Like this video if you think I deserve the chance to reunite with my kids. Subscribe for more stories like this. and share your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you think about all of this. I'll see you all in the next story.